let's get this out of the way. This game sucked. I was shocked, honestly. I was expecting good. I was excited. I was like, oh yeah, it's going to be great. And then I started playing and it's like, okay, the intro was pretty good. I give a plus to the intro. And the intro boss was neat and the first few levels did some good things. And okay. And then it just started to go a little bit south. And then it started to go very south. And then it never stopped getting worse. Now, I could give you a play-by-play, but the stream's only 3 hours. I'm not going to summarize all that. I mean, come on. But I do want to give you a little bit of an idea of what the hell is going on here. I cannot, by the way, I just want to say, I cannot believe this game was put out by Way Forward. They have done so many good games that I have adored. I'm actually looking forward to reviewing the rest of the Shantae series. I would love to dig into the Blaster Master Zero series. And I want to play that new Ruby game that's coming out. What the hell? Okay. Now, I don't know, because I wasn't able to find any concrete information. There's actually not a lot of info that I was able to find about this game. But I suspect that what we have here is one of two things which are not mutually exclusive. One, this wasn't the, let's call them the A team. This was a game that was handed off to some of the B developers or newer developers or whatever to cut their teeth on it. And I would probably do the same thing if I'm just being completely honest with myself. If I was running a dev studio and I'd just gotten some new talent and we got this licensing gig, nobody cares. It's got a rough deadline and we've got to get this out and we're basically paid for it regardless. So let's just push this thing out. Here, work on this, get used to animation and design and scripting and hitboxes and all the stuff that goes into game design. Let them get some experience in for when they make the actually good games, right? Option 2, I hinted at it just briefly earlier, rushed game. In other words, they had a hard deadline because just about every licensed game ever has a hard deadline, and that never works out well. Excuse me. So, normally I talk about the story. This is one of the most disjointed and awkward stories in a game I've seen in recent memory. It's mostly absent, but it's just, huh? Okay, so we go down into the crypts. Oh my god, a mummy's getting out. No problem, let's mobilize. We'll go, we'll find her. Oh, we found her. Oh, she ran away. Okay, well, we'll chase her into the forest. Oh, she ran away. Okay, we'll go down into the subway. Oh, she ran away. Okay, she's attacking our headquarters. What? Yeah, she's attacking our Okay, we'll save our headquarters. Okay, we failed to save our headquarters. Everybody's dead. But now she's attacking London. Okay, I guess we'll save London. It's the closest thing that anything in the game has to the movie, by the way, is the London thing. Okay, we've saved London by going up the tower, because where else are you going to go? And we've defeated her there. Okay, she's gone down to her crypt. Okay, well, we kill her. Well, then Set pops out. Oh, we kill Set. Okay, we either die or live. The end. That's the story. It's just, I said this on stream, one of the things I was reminded of, imagine a GM of a D&D game or something like that, who has designed several encounters, but has no idea how to string them together into an actual campaign. So it's like, all right, you've just completed the cave dungeon that I designed. But as you leave, you see a sign that says, go to the forest. And I'm like, ah, sure. And then we go to the forest. Okay, after the forest section, you find a tunnel leading down into the depths. Oh, we go into the depths. And there's no logic. There's no conjunction. There's no anything. There's no thread, thematic, literal, consequential, logical. Nothing. It's just go to the next thing. That's the story. Moving on. Gameplay. One of the things I've talked about a lot lately is how one mechanic, another mechanic, and these two systems in game design can magnify each other, make them better or make them worse because of how they interlock and how they work together or don't work together. I usually talk about this in a positive light. How, Resident Evil 4 was, of course, what kind of started this trend lately. But there's plenty of games we've covered recently where, because of the level design, which is balanced by the encounter design, which is balanced by the enemy's attack design, which is balanced by your weapon design, all of it just kind of flows smoothly and it all is awesome, right? This is the total opposite of that. I legitimately feel that large chunks of this game were not designed. That simply pieces were thrown here with no real logic or reason to them with regards to the terrain and the level design thereof. Where items are, there's no logic or flow or reason to it. Where enemies are, they're just randomly scattered across the area. What enemies are placed where? Well, that also has no design to it. They just seem to attack in a seemingly random fashion. The thumbnail I chose for this may seem like a little bit of a strange one, but it's a room that was perfectly designed to be bullcrap. Not in a good way. So there's this enemy spawner up here, for those who haven't seen the thumbnails. There's an enemy spawner, okay? Alright, that's cool. That's nuts, whatever. We're over here. There's a glass jar here. There's 2 platforms. And there's the thing we're actually after. This thing will infinitely spawn these irritating enemies. I'll come back to that. And that's what it does. You know, it's, okay, we'll just destroy the thing and then get down and defeat this guy without breaking the glass. Because if we break the glass, we get an even more irritating enemy. But we can't do that because there's this little nudge of something that's just part of the terrain that's blocking our shots from hitting it. And did I mention we can only hit in 8 directions? So we can't hit the spawner. Okay, well, get down and fight off the annoying enemies while you're fighting the thing. So the weapons in this game, other than the flamethrower, absolutely suck. I mentioned back in Time Spinner how one of the weapons you had was a gun orb. And what this allowed you to do was have a straight hit scan shot, but it was very narrow, so you had to aim it quite carefully. That was fine, because it was one of the several options you had, and it was piercing, and it gave you a different kit for different builds, right? But in this case, every weapon, except for the flamethrower, is that. Very narrow attack that just hits this area. So if there's an enemy here, nothing. If there's an enemy doing this, well, occasionally the bullets might intersect them. Did I mention the base gun does very little damage? I kept calling it the pea shooter on camera because it was just exactly what it felt like. It felt like I was shooting peas at the enemies. Even just basic enemies would take multiple rounds of pouring fire into them before they would actually die. Basic, regular, normal enemies. So, you have a difficulty hitting with a gun that doesn't do much damage. You can only aim in 8 directions while enemies are doing this around you. Do you see the problem? Usually games like this will do something to mitigate this. They'll either make it so the enemies have a larger hitbox, or maybe they'll make their patterns in a way that incline them to get in the way of your shot under certain circumstances, like after a few seconds of attacking you, they'll be like, ha-ha, ha-ha, and then they'll get hit. Or sometimes they'll just straight up increase the height of your shot so it actually hits more. None of that was done here. This is a problem that hits the entire game. Shooting anything is irritating. And what I just mentioned is one of the most irritating. The brain enemies are probably the most irritating enemy in the game. But this is a problem from the very beginning all the way to the very end, and it only gets worse. Irritating enemies with not thought out level design, with not thought out enemy attack design, weapon design, and you start to see how these systems start to interlock to make this game even worse than it already is. Hang on, I'm not done yet. One of the things we gauge is penalty for failure. Now, as a game designer analyst, never made a game, but I've been studying game design for about 2 decades now, I very firmly believe that most games should have some form of penalty of failure. I also think that there's a huge amount of variability and degree and gradients and what that goes into and blah, 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 blah. It depends wildly on what you're going for with your game. But there should be something to have some kind of penalty, some kind of you failed, so that there can also be a you succeeded, right? This game's penalty for failure is straight out of the old NES games. Not the good ones, the old ones. For those of you who aren't around for that or haven't played those, a lot of the early and old NES games had a system where the penalty for failure was starting the game over. Now, to explain that a little bit, you didn't have lives or continues or whatever. Maybe you had a few lives. Maybe you had a couple of continues. But let's say you have 3 lives and 2 continues, right? What that translates into is you get 3 deaths, you get 9 deaths. 9 deaths, and then you have to start the game over from the very beginning of the game. Now, this is because a lot of this, there's 2 big reasons. One is because some of this is arcade design that's just kind of hauled over. A lot of the early game designers were arcade designers, so that kind of bled over. The other problem is, of course, they wanted the games to seem longer than they were. Because most NES games, just like Atari games, could be beaten in like half an hour if you knew what you were doing. There's a reason why speedruns of Ninja Gaiden tend to be in the minutes range. So, we do these tricks to make them longer. This is bad design, in my honest and frank opinion. Now, there are mitigating factors, and again, gradient, blah, 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 it depends on the game, but in general, I tend to lean against that harsh of a penalty. This game has a penalty as harsh as that. One of the things I read when I was coming into it, which I didn't understand at the time, was that there was a possibility to snowball with regards to death, which would require you to, and I quote, start over. That was such an alien concept to me at the time as I was reading it that it didn't really process what that meant. But given how I've told you this, you can now understand the mentality. I legitimately believe that the intention of this game, especially in the late game, in the later stages, is if you die snowball, the intention is for you to start the game over. Just like in an old arcade game or an NES game. The way this works, this is brilliant. You die, and you get right back up as the enemy. That corpse now has all of your weapons, your health ups, and all of your upgrades, with the exception of the things that are literally critical to progression, like the ability to cling the wall, or do a high jump, or sprint. If they had those, then you would literally have to start over. So, almost everything that makes you have any capacity to deal with anything is now on that corpse. You have to now go back to where you died and kill your previous self in order to get all that stuff back. Anybody who's played any of the old MMOs, this probably sounds somewhat familiar. But the fact that you actually have to kill the previous you makes it even worse than corpse bombing or corpse dragging or any of the other methods that used to be done back in EverQuest and Ultima Online and even early Asheron's Call. But wait, it's much worse than whatever you're thinking, because this already sounds bad, I'm sure. So, snowballing, right? Let's say you're in an area where the enemies hit pretty hard, and there's a lot of them because there's way too many enemies everywhere because they didn't think about the enemy design whatsoever. Oh, by the way, did I mention that several enemies in several areas, including the later stages, spawn infinitely? Just forever, so there's no clearing. So you have to navigate fighting some of the enemies that you can permanently kill, while dodging the ones you can't, while moving through this area with the level 1 pea shooter gun, because you lost all your weapons, and no health upgrades, because you lost all those too. You have 99 health, and the pea shooter, and that is it. No grenades either, no nothing. You see the problem, because these enemies already hit hard. They are designed to hit hard. They're late-level enemies. That makes sense. But these enemies will literally, and this is not exaggeration, either 3-shot or 2-shot you from full health, depending on which enemy we're talking about at this point of the game, once you die. So you have to avoid getting hit once or twice, depending, and still get back to yourself and still kill yourself while, kill your previous self, while amongst all the enemies that are also trying to kill you, that obviously killed you before when you had all that health and ammunition and weaponry. Do you see the problems here? This is when so many of the other problems really start to interlock. The level design, the layout, the enemy placement, the enemy density, the respawning. There's a lot of Medusa heads. You remember those from Castlevania? Yeah, those suck. There's a lot of those. And there's a lot of enemies that will attack you from off camera. There's a lot of enemies that attack you less than a second after they spawn, so that's cool. All of the various problems that make up this game all combine into the problem of the penalty for failure, which itself is one of the worst penalties for failure I have ever seen in gaming. I get the idea, and what's really sad is it would be so easy to come up with 1 or 2 or 3 or 50 or 100 different ways to mitigate this. Maybe make a way to permanently recover it. Maybe make it so that you can hit a button to say, I'd like to lose some progress or lose some points or lose an achievement, but respawn my corpse here so I can recover it. Or maybe the ability to decide, okay, I'm going to lock in this specific gun, and this is the gun I'm going to restart with once I die. There's so many different ways they could have made this at least kind of work, and instead, it's awful. Hang on, I'm not done. So this game uses this very serious bullet point syndrome going on here. Some of you may not be aware of the fact that there's this game called Metroid. Several of the Metroid games have these little enemy dispensers. These exist to refill you. Now, to be clear, as much as I love the Metroid series, I don't like this design. I never have. It's just enemy and you kill it and you get a thing, and enemy, you kill it and you get a thing. But even that is only kind of bad, because the way they design item drops is not only dependent on what you need, But also, there's usually things like these specific enemies have a higher chance of dropping these things, and the further into the game you get, the more likely they are to drop the large health ups. This game doesn't do that. They drop small ups. They drop 100% of the time, but they drop small health ups over and over and over. Very rarely will they drop a big health up, and even more rarely will they drop ammo. There are several of these enemy spawners. This is bullet point syndrome. A spawner that spawns enemies that you kill to refill without thinking about the design that goes into that. So you can just sit here, kill, grab, kill, grab. You can actually net loss on health if you're not careful, because these things also hit like a truck, because of course they do. I'm not even mentioning the fact that there's several parts of this game that feel anti-designed. I know I've said that several times, but I mean, like, so you're going through an area, and you have the grenades. Did I mention that the grenades are what you use to open doors? They are the missile equivalents in the Metroid allegory that we've got going on here. You can only carry a few of them. Early on, you can only carry 3. They are quite useful in combat. They are required for doors. Do you see the problem? Especially given the aforementioned spawn thing I just mentioned. One time I got to a door, successfully, and the level was designed that the way forward was through the door. Now, I could backtrack, and I actually successfully did, because I'm good at video games, but I only made it back with about 4 health left over. It was very clearly designed that this was the path forward, and they didn't design a way for you to backtrack back out of it, because they didn't think about the fact that you might have gotten to that without a frickin' grenade, which is required to progress through it, which you couldn't see, by the way, before you got there. Let me talk about another thing that this game does wrong. The map. You look at the map and think, what's the exact same map as Time Spinner? No. So they get the fact that you can do color coding on the map, right? That's cool. But what they don't do is 2 things. First of all, there's no indication of where map stuff was. Now, I know what you mean by that. You're probably thinking, what, like you get the map and it doesn't fill out the whole thing? Super Metroid didn't do that. Yeah, but Super Metroid did a very careful thing where it would give you like a little line of hallway over here, and it's like, oh, that's not connected to anything. One of these areas probably leads to it. It's an indicator. Go in that general direction and find it yourself, right? Guidance and flow of exploration is what I call this. It's very important in most games, but it is critically important for a Metroidvania. This game I gave multiple negatives for guidance and flow of exploration, by the way. So, not only is there none of that when you actually get the map, so there's just areas that have no indicators, but one of the things Time Spinners did is it had those little spaces where so there's the white line outline. There's a space right here. Well, that means that's a way you can go that way. So you now know that's something you can do in that direction. None of that is here. At no point in time does the map give any kind of indication of where any connecting points are anywhere. Hang on, it gets worse. Because the other thing that it does, in addition to not revealing portions of the map, is the map itself, the actual overworld, the level design. There's no, and this is admittedly, there's a whole art to this. There's nothing to guide you in any given direction in terms of the flow of the level, in terms of what you're visually being drawn to, in terms of what enemies are guiding you towards. All of these things are part of that guidance and flow of exploration. It's kind of a funneling thing. The game wants you to go this particular direction. You don't have to. But, there's something that catches your eye up there. Imagine you enter a room. It doesn't matter the game style. Let's just imagine you enter a room in a game, and you open up, and there's the room, and there's a door. There's a door to the left, and there's like a little tunnel to the right. And as you're looking at this, like the first thing that happens, you enter the room, is you see something skittering into the tunnel in the upper right. I was like, what the hell is that? And you hear this in the distance. And then there's just a silence, and it's like, okay. So that's a little thing, of course, and that's not a perfect example because I literally just made it up right off the top of my head. But what it does is it automatically drags your attention that way. You may or may not go that way. That depends on you. You don't have to. But it's getting you something to indicate something's over there. There was a critical weapon upgrade that I completely skipped over because nothing whatsoever indicated that it was there. I could keep bashing this game. The bosses are boring as hell. They have, on average, 3 attacks to them. Some of them have 5. But even the ones that have 5 commit 2 critical sins. First of all, I mentioned ammo earlier, right? So you use all the ammo. Okay, you switch to another gun, you use your ammo. And you've done less than half the boss's health. So guess what you're stuck with for the rest of the half? The pea shooter. Yeah, you can start to see how those systems start to interlock because there's no ammo refill. The bosses don't do anything to give you any health or any ammo. There's no enemies you can attack. That's not true. The first boss, the good boss, the intro boss, does actually spawn ads, and you can kill those to get health and ammo refills. That's good. It's the only one. Everything else is just keep shooting the pea shooter for like 3 minutes, which probably doesn't sound like a long time. And honestly, if it was a good boss fight, 3 minutes wouldn't be bad. But it's 3 minutes of holding down the fire button and then jumping periodically to dodge its one attack. That's it. For the whole game, by the way. The whole way, it's that way. All the way up to the last boss. I actually gave up on this game. I didn't actually beat it. We ended up watching a video, 2 videos specifically, to see the last bits of the game. And honestly, I'm not actually ashamed of that. Ignoring the fact that I have nothing to prove because I just beat Cyber Shadow without any kind of cheats or guide. The fact of the matter is, this game is legitimately not worth my time. And I wanted to go over the details of why. Because that's my job. I do hope you've enjoyed my thoughts, such as they are. Tomorrow, or whenever this goes live, I'm not actually sure right now, we'll be starting the Final Fantasy XIV block, and hopefully that'll be substantially more fun for everyone. See you around.